Hashtag humanity stayed quiet for millennia. Until the dangerous ship returned. Hashtag part 2. Captain Sarah Chun stood before the observation deck of the vessel Remembrance, watching as star systems passed by like distant candles in an infinite cathedral. Behind her, the soft hum of probability engines created a harmony that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat over the past 3 millennia. She was no longer entirely human. None of them were, but the core of what made them human had only grown stronger in their long exile among the stars. Status report, Marcus, she said without turning from the viewport. Her voice carried easily through the ship's consciousness-linked communication system, reaching her chief engineer in the probability core several decks below. We're maintaining temporal acceleration at factor 12, Marcus Rodriguez replied, his mental voice tinged with the satisfaction of a craftsman proud of his work. The galaxy's perception of our transit time remains at standard velocity, but we're actually moving at near instantaneous speeds. Should reach the core systems right on schedule. Sarah nodded, her enhanced perception catching the subtle changes in the ship's bioneural network as it processed the emotional states of its 12-person crew. The Remembrance wasn't just their vessel. It was their partner, grown rather than built, evolved rather than designed. Its hull was composed of programmable matter that could shift between states of existence, making it simultaneously solid and ethereal, present and absent, depending on the needs of the moment. Any response to our approach? She asked Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka, their communications specialist. The Galactic Council is in full panic mode. Yuki reported from her position at the ship's neural interface. Her consciousness was partially merged with the ship's sensors, allowing her to monitor electromagnetic communications across dozens of star systems simultaneously. They've activated every defense fleet they have and are broadcasting emergency warnings to all member species. What kind of warnings? This came from Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's xenobiologist and cultural analyst. She had spent the last 3,000 years studying the various species that had enforced humanity's quarantine, understanding their psychology, their fears, their capabilities. The usual, Yuki replied with dark amusement. Humans are dangerous. Humans are unpredictable. Humans must be contained at all costs. They're treating us like a natural disaster rather than a sentient species. Sarah finally turned from the viewport, her ageless face bearing the weight of centuries. The genetic modifications that had allowed her and her crew to survive their long journey had stopped their aging process, but the accumulated experience of millennia showed in her eyes. Elena, what's your assessment of current galactic politics? Elena's consciousness briefly touched the ship's vast database, accessing the information they had quietly gathered during their apparent exile. 12 major powers control the galaxy now, compared to the 47 smaller nations that existed when we left. Consolidation through conquest seems to be the preferred method of expansion. The Villani Empire has absorbed 6 former independent systems in the past century alone. Conquest, mused Commander David Park, their tactical officer. His mind was permanently linked to the ship's weapons systems, making him aware of every tool of destruction at their disposal. They speak of our violence while building the largest military forces in galactic history. Hypocrisy is a universal constant, Sarah observed. Thomas, what do our deep scans reveal about current military capabilities? Chief Science Officer Thomas Wright had been monitoring galactic technology development throughout their exile, watching as various species struggled to understand principles that humanity had mastered millennia ago. They've made incremental improvements to traditional technologies, he reported. Faster ships, stronger shields, more powerful plasma weapons. But nothing fundamentally revolutionary. They're still thinking in terms of classical physics. While we've been playing with the fundamental forces of reality itself, added Marcus from the engineering section. They can't conceive of weapons that rewrite the laws of causality or shields that exist in parallel dimensions. To them, we might as well be magic. Sarah smiled, though there was no humor in the expression. Arthur C. Clarke once said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. But he never considered what happens when magic decides to stop being sufficiently advanced and starts being simply magic. The reference to ancient Earth literature wasn't lost on the crew. During their long journey, they had become living repositories of human culture, keeping alive the stories, songs, and wisdom of a species the galaxy had tried to forget. But they had also become something more than human, evolved beyond the limitations of biology and physics that had once defined their species. Captain, interrupted Navigation Officer Lisa Wong from her position, merged with the ship's space-time manipulation systems. We're approaching the first inhabited system, the Meridian Colony, population approximately 12 billion across 7 planets. Composition? Sarah asked. Mixed species settlement, Elena reported. Primarily Zephyrian agricultural specialists and Corvin mining engineers, with significant populations of Alani administrators and hegemony merchants. Standard mid-rim colony profile. And their defenses? David's assessment was immediate and comprehensive. 3 orbital platforms with standard plasma batteries, a patrol fleet of 14 light cruisers, and a single dreadnought that appears to be Volani design. Against conventional forces, it's a reasonable defensive arrangement. But not against us. Against us, it's decorative. Sarah considered their options. The original plan had been simple. Return to the galaxy, demonstrate humanity's continued existence and advancement, and begin negotiations for the end of their quarantine. But intelligence gathered during their approach had revealed disturbing trends. The species that had originally enforced humanity's exile had not simply forgotten about them. They had actively worked to erase all positive records of human civilization, leaving only the fearful legends designed to justify continued isolation. Yuki, open a communication channel to the colony's governing council, Sarah ordered. Standard diplomatic protocols. Channel open, Captain. Sarah's image was transmitted across space-time, appearing simultaneously in the council chambers of all 7 planets in the Meridian system. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Panic, confusion, and the desperate activation of emergency protocols that hadn't been used in centuries. People of Meridian, Sarah began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spoken with gods and demons among the stars. I am Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth Vessel Remembrance. We come bearing a message for the Galactic Council and all member species. The response came from Governor Thexan, an elderly Zephyrian whose blue-scaled skin had paled to nearly white with shock. This transmission cannot be real. Humans are quarantined to their home system. They lack faster-than-light capability. Many things that were true 3,000 years ago, Sarah replied calmly, are no longer accurate. We have returned to collect what was taken from us, and to settle accounts that have remained open far too long. What do you want? The governor stammered. Justice, Sarah said simply. For 3 millennia, your species and others have kept humanity imprisoned, painting us as monsters to justify your fears. You have stolen our freedom, our future, and our right to exist among the stars. The time has come to balance those scales. You're threatening us. This came from another council member, a Corvin whose rocky carapace was shifting through alarmed color patterns. I'm informing you, Sarah corrected. The Galactic Council will present themselves at the coordinates we're transmitting within 1 standard galactic week. They will come unarmed, unescorted, and prepare to discuss the terms of humanity's return to galactic society. This is not a request. And if they refuse? Governor Thexan asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Sarah's smile was cold as the void between stars. Then, we will remind them why they were so eager to quarantine us in the first place. The transmission ended, leaving the Meridian system in chaos as the Remembrance continued its journey toward the galactic core. Behind them, emergency messages flooded subspace communication networks, carrying word of humanity's return to every corner of civilized space. In her quarters, Sarah stood once again before a viewport, watching stars wheel by as her ship rewrote the laws of physics to achieve impossible speeds. The weight of 3,000 years of planning and preparation pressed down on her shoulders, but she bore it willingly. She and her crew had become more than human during their exile, but they had never forgotten what it meant to be human. The galaxy was about to remember as well, whether it wanted to or not. #humanity stayed quiet for millennia, until the dangerous ship returned. Part 3. The emergency session of the Combined Defense Initiative had been ongoing for 18 straight hours. Representatives from every major military power in the galaxy crowded into the secure bunker beneath Nexus Prime, the heavily fortified capital world of the Galactic Core. Admiral Kex RA of the 5th Defense Fleet stood before a massive holographic display showing the current tactical situation, her 4 arms moving independently as she manipulated data streams and sensor readings. The human vessel has passed through 14 systems since leaving Meridian, she reported to the assembled commanders. In each case, they've done nothing more threatening than transmit their message demanding the Council surrender. No attacks, no demonstrations of force, no aggressive maneuvers. That makes them more dangerous, not less, growled General Vorth of the Hegemony War Machine. His species, the Krenari, had evolved from apex predators and understood the psychology of the hunt. They're confident. Predators only show restraint when they know the prey cannot escape. Fleet Commander Isaac Stahl of the Villani Empire studied the tactical displays with the analytical mind that had made her species the premier military strategist in the galaxy. What concerns me is their speed. Our best estimates suggest they're covering distances that should take weeks in a matter of hours. That level of faster-than-light capability suggests technological advancement beyond our understanding. Technology we could study and replicate if we can capture their ship intact, suggested Admiral Mortek of the Crystalline Union. His species thought in terms of technological absorption and improvement, always seeking to add new capabilities to their collective knowledge base. You're assuming we can capture them at all, Admiral Kexare replied grimly. I've had 15 different science teams analyze the sensor data from their passage through my patrol zone. None of them can explain how their ship works. The energy signatures don't match any known propulsion system. Their whole material appears to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously, and their weapons. She paused, manipulating the display to show detailed scans of the vessel's exterior. What about their weapons? General Vorth pressed. We can't detect any, Kexare admitted. No plasma cannons, no missile tubes, no particle beam arrays, nothing that registers on our sensors as a weapon system. Either they're using technology so advanced we can't recognize it, or they don't need conventional weapons, finished Elder Mordun, who had been silent throughout most of the briefing. The ancient being had been granted special status to attend the military meeting, his millennia of experience deemed too valuable to ignore. Explan demanded Fleet Commander Sixtal. You're thinking like conventional military strategists, Mordun said, his aged voice carrying harmonics of deep weariness. You see a ship and assume it needs weapons to be dangerous. But what if the ship itself is the weapon? Before anyone could respond to this cryptic statement, warning klaxons began sounding throughout the bunker. Emergency communication protocols activated as urgent messages flooded in from across the galaxy. This is Orbital Defense Station Kappa 7, came a panicked voice over the comm system. The human vessel has appeared at the edge of our sensor perimeter. No hyperspace wake, no energy buildup. It just materialized. Admiral Kexare quickly brought up the station's sensor feeds on the main display. The dark hull of the human ship hung motionless against the star field, approximately 1 million kilometers from Nexus Prime. At this distance, it appeared deceptively small and harmless. All stations, report status, Kexare ordered. Defense Grid Alpha through Omega are online and tracking the target, reported the station commander. 17 dreadnoughts are moving to intercept. ETA 12 minutes. Belay that order. Mordun suddenly commanded, his voice carrying an authority that made even the military commanders pause. Do not approach that vessel. Elder Mordun, with respect, this is a military matter now, General Vorth objected. Is it? Mordun asked. Tell me, General, what do you know about human psychology? They're violent, unpredictable, and dangerous, Vorth replied automatically. Violent, yes. Dangerous, absolutely. But unpredictable. Mordun's ancient eyes fixed on the general with unsettling intensity. Humans are perhaps the most predictable species in the galaxy, once you understand their fundamental nature. Which is what? Fleet Commander Isaac Stahl asked. They're storytellers, Mordun replied. Every human action follows a narrative structure. They see their lives as stories being told, and they shape their behavior to fit the roles they believe they're playing. Right now, they're playing the role of the wronged hero returning to seek justice. That's anthropological speculation, not tactical intelligence, Admiral Mortek protested. Is it? Then, explain their choice of vessel designation. Mordun gestured toward the display showing the human ship. They call it Remembrance, not Vengeance or Retribution, or any of the names you might expect from a species seeking revenge. They want us to remember something. Remember what? Kexra asked. Why we were so frightened of them in the first place. As if responding to Mordun's words, the human vessel began to change. The dark hull material rippled like liquid, and new structures emerged from its surface. But these weren't weapons in any conventional sense. Instead, the ship was transforming itself into something that looked disturbingly organic, as if a mountain-sized organism was awakening after eons of sleep. By the ancient codes, whispered Admiral Kex, what are they doing? Demonstrating, Mordun replied simply. The transformation continued for several minutes, until the vessel had taken on an entirely new configuration. Where once there had been a sleek, technological ship, now there floated something that defied easy categorization. It was part machine, part creature, part force of nature. Tendrils of controlled energy extended from its hull like the limbs of some cosmic entity, and along its length, those glowing names had multiplied into millions upon millions of individual markers. New sensor readings coming in, reported one of Kexra's technicians. The vessel's mass has increased by several orders of magnitude, but its density remains constant. It's as if they're pulling additional matter from somewhere else. Parallel dimensions, Mordun said with certainty. They're not just using advanced technology. They're manipulating the fundamental structure of reality itself. That's impossible, Admiral Mortek stated flatly. For us, yes. For them. Mordun gestured toward the transformed vessel. They've had 3,000 years of exile to develop technologies we can't even imagine. While we've been refining plasma weapons and improving shield generators, they've been rewriting the laws of physics. A new communication signal suddenly filled the bunker, but it wasn't coming through normal subspace channels. Instead, it seemed to emerge from the very air around them, as if the human vessel was speaking directly to their location across impossible distances. People of Nexus Prime, came a voice that belonged to no single individual, but somehow contained multitudes. We are Captain Chun and the crew of the Remembrance. We have waited patiently for your response to our diplomatic overture. Since none has been forthcoming, we will now provide a demonstration of our current capabilities. What kind of demonstration? General Vorth demanded, speaking directly toward the air. The educational kind, the composite voice replied with what might have been amusement. Please observe your primary star. Every sensor in the system immediately turned toward Nexus Prime's sun, a massive G-class star that had burned steadily for over 4 billion years. For a moment, nothing seemed different. Then, slowly, impossibly, patterns began to appear on the star's surface. Vast geometric designs were being drawn in the stellar corona itself, visible across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. They're manipulating a star, Admiral Kexra said in a voice barely above a whisper. They're using our own sun as a writing surface. The patterns continue to form, creating symbols that every spacefaring species could recognize. Mathematical equations, chemical formulas, and basic geometric principles. But, as the display continued, the symbols became more complex, showing advanced physics concepts that push the boundaries of galactic scientific understanding. This is impossible, Admiral Mortek repeated, but his voice now carried doubt rather than certainty. This is a species that has transcended the limitations of conventional physics, Mordun corrected. They're not just showing us that they can manipulate stellar matter. They're teaching us that everything we think we know about the universe is incomplete. The stellar display continued for exactly 1 hour, during which time every military commander in the bunker watched in growing horror as the humans casually demonstrated power on a scale that dwarfed anything they had previously imagined. When the patterns finally faded and the star returned to its normal appearance, the silence in the bunker was absolute. Demonstration concluded, the composite voice announced. You have 6 standard days to produce the Galactic Council for our scheduled meeting. We will be waiting at the coordinates transmitted to your governments. Do not disappoint us again. The communication ended, leaving the assembled military leadership to contemplate a simple, terrifying truth. They were not dealing with a conventional enemy. They were facing a species that had spent 3 millennia becoming something beyond their understanding, and that species was no longer content to remain in exile. As emergency sessions convened across the galaxy, and defense fleets scrambled to prepare for an impossible confrontation, one question echoed through every strategic planning meeting. How do you fight an enemy that can rewrite the laws of reality itself? The answer, as Elder Mordan could have told them, was simple. You don't fight them. You listen to their story, and you pray that they're feeling merciful when it ends. Humanity stayed quiet for millennia, until the dangerous ship returned. Part 4. The neutral zone established for the meeting lay in the empty space between star systems, far from any inhabited worlds. Here, in the cosmic void where no species could claim territorial advantage, the Galactic Council had agreed to meet with the human representatives. Ambassador Zixtar stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Unity, watching as ships from 12 different civilizations maintained careful distances from each other in a rough sphere around the designated meeting point. Still no sign of the human vessel, reported communications officer Keltar, his nervous energy translating into rapid clicking sound from his insectoid vocal apparatus. Long-range sensors show nothing but empty space at the coordinates they provided. They'll come, Elder Mordan assured him from his position at the observation window. The ancient being had insisted on attending this historic meeting, despite the obvious dangers involved. Humans have a sense of dramatic timing that borders on the theatrical. They won't simply appear, they'll make an entrance. Ambassador Zixtar reviewed the diplomatic protocols one final time, though he suspected that conventional negotiation tactics would prove inadequate for this situation. The 12 members of the Galactic Council had spent days arguing about how to approach these talks. Some advocated for a position of strength, backed by the combined military might of their civilizations. Others preferred appeasement, offering concessions in hopes of avoiding conflict. A few had even suggested attempting to contain the humans once again, though the recent demonstration at Nexus Prime had made that option seem suicidal. What exactly do they want? Asked Counselor Vexena, her serpentine coils shifting restlessly as she reviewed the limited intelligence they had gathered. Their initial message spoke of justice and settling accounts, but they've provided no specific demands. Because they're waiting to see what we offer, Elder Mordan replied. This entire situation is a test of our character and wisdom. They already know what they want. They're determining what we're willing to give. And if we fail their test, Director Keflon asked, her translucent skin pulsing with anxiety patterns. Then, we discover why our ancestors were so eager to quarantine them in the first place, Mordan said grimly. Before anyone could respond, every sensor on every ship in the diplomatic flotilla registered the same impossible reading. Space-time was folding in on itself at the center of their formation. Reality seemed to ripple and bend, creating distortions that hurt to look at directly. Then, with no sound except the collective intake of breath from thousands of witnesses, the human vessel simply unfolded into existence. The remembrance had changed again since its demonstration at Nexus Prime. Where once it had appeared as a dark, angular ship, it now resembled something that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Parts of its structure appeared solid and technological, while other sections looked almost crystalline, as if they were made of compressed starlight. Most unsettling of all, observers found that looking at the ship directly was difficult. Their eyes seemed to slide away from it, as if their visual processing systems were unable to fully comprehend what they were seeing. By all the gods of my ancestors, whispered Captain Thexan of the Meridian Defense Force, who had insisted on attending despite his civilian status. What have they become? Something we were never meant to understand, Ambassador Zixtar replied, though he tried to keep the fear out of his voice. A communication channel opened, but, unlike their previous transmissions, this one felt somehow more intimate, as if the humans were speaking directly into the minds of their listeners rather than using conventional technology. Representatives of the Galactic Council, came the familiar composite voice, though now it carried harmonics that seemed to resonate at frequencies beyond normal hearing. We acknowledge your presence and your willingness to engage in dialogue. Please prepare to receive our delegation. Delegation? Director Keflon asked. How many? Her question was interrupted as 12 points of light detached themselves from the human vessel and began moving toward the Unity. As they approached, the lights resolved into humanoid figures, but they were moving through open space without any visible protection or propulsion systems. They're walking through vacuum. Observer Keltar reported unnecessarily, his voice carrying a mixture of awe and terror. No environmental suits, no personal shields, no life support systems of any kind. Because they no longer need them, Elder Mordun said with something approaching resignation. They've transcended biological limitations. We're about to meet with post-human entities that have spent 3 millennia becoming something we can barely recognize as the species we once knew. The 12 figures passed through the Unity's hull as if it were made of mist, materializing directly in the diplomatic chamber without triggering any security systems. The assembled representatives found themselves face-to-face with beings that wore human forms, but radiated an otherness that was profoundly unsettling. Captain Sarah Chun stepped forward, and though she appeared much as she had in their earlier transmissions, closer inspection revealed subtle wrongnesses that marked her as no longer entirely human. Her eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire universes, and when she moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around her, as if the normal laws of physics were merely suggestions in her presence. Esteemed representatives, she said, and her voice now carried the weight of geological ages, we thank you for agreeing to these discussions. I am Captain Sarah Chun, speaking for the 12-person crew of the Remembrance, and, by extension, for all humanity. Captain Chun, Ambassador Zixtar, began carefully, we appreciate your willingness to engage in diplomatic dialogue rather than other alternatives. Perhaps we could begin by discussing your specific grievances and potential solutions. Sarah smiled, and the expression was somehow more terrifying than any threat would have been. Our grievances are simple, Ambassador. For 3,000 years, our species has been imprisoned within a single star system, cut off from the galactic community, denied our birthright as children of the cosmos. We have been portrayed as monsters and savages, our achievements erased from history, our very existence treated as a mistake to be hidden away. The quarantine was implemented for the safety of all species, Counselor Vex Anna protested. Your people's violent tendencies and unpredictable behavior posed a threat to galactic stability. Did we? Asked another member of the human delegation, a man who had introduced himself as Dr. Thomas Wright. Or did our refusal to submit to galactic hegemony pose a threat to your political control? What do you mean? Director Keflon asked. 3,000 years ago, the galaxy was controlled by 47 different species, each maintaining their own territories and governing philosophies, Sarah explained. Today, 12 powers control everything, having absorbed or conquered the rest. This consolidation didn't happen by accident. It was the result of systematic expansion and absorption of smaller civilizations. Humanity refused to be absorbed, Dr. Wright continued. We insisted on maintaining our independence, our own approach to technology and society. This made us a dangerous example for other species who might have preferred freedom to forced integration. So you portrayed us as uniquely violent and dangerous, added a third human, Commander David Park. You used our military capabilities during the Silence Wars as justification for permanent quarantine, while ignoring the fact that we only fought defensively against species attempting to conquer our territory. Elder Mordun shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The historical records indicate that human forces were excessively effective in those conflicts. We were fighting for our survival, Sarah replied. When faced with extinction, any species will use whatever capabilities they possess. The difference is that we possessed capabilities your predecessors didn't understand and couldn't counter. Capabilities you've apparently improved upon during your exile, Ambassador Zixtar observed, glancing nervously at the way reality seemed to warp slightly around the human delegation. Exponentially, Sarah confirmed. 3,000 years of isolation gave us time to explore possibilities that conventional science considers impossible. We learned to manipulate quantum probabilities, to access parallel dimensions, to interface directly with the fundamental forces that govern reality itself. And now you've returned seeking revenge, Counselor Vexana accused. Justice, Sarah corrected. There's a difference. Revenge would involve destroying your civilizations and claiming the galaxy for ourselves. Justice involves correcting the historical record, ending our quarantine, and ensuring that what was done to us is never done to any other species. What exactly are you proposing? Director Keflon asked. Sarah gestured, and a three-dimensional display appeared in the air between them, showing a map of the galaxy with various territories highlighted in different colors. First, humanity will be granted full membership in the galactic community, with all the rights and privileges that entails. Second, the quarantine zone around Earth will be dissolved, and human vessels will be granted free passage through all galactic territories. That seems reasonable, Ambassador Zixtar said cautiously. Third, Sarah continued, reparations will be paid to compensate for 3 millennia of lost development and opportunity. The exact amount can be negotiated, but it will be substantial. How substantial? Asked Counselor Vexana, though her tone suggested she was afraid of the answer. The equivalent of 12 full star systems, with all their resources and infrastructure, Dr. Wright replied calmly. To be selected by us from territories currently controlled by the species that originally enforced the quarantine. The diplomatic chamber erupted in protests and objections, but Sarah raised her hand, and reality seemed to crystallize around her gesture, creating a zone of absolute silence that cut through all other sound. And fourth, she said when quiet had been restored, full disclosure of the true history of human galactic relations will be made public throughout all member civilizations. The propaganda that has portrayed us as monsters will be corrected, and the actual reasons for our quarantine will be acknowledged. Those terms are impossible, Director Keflon protested. No government could agree to such extensive concessions. Then, you've chosen to reject our offer, Sarah replied with perfect calm. We understand. We expected this outcome. Actually, it follows the narrative pattern quite perfectly. What narrative pattern? Elder Mordun asked, though something in his ancient voice suggested he already knew. The one where the wrong party seeks justice through diplomacy, is rejected by those in power, and is therefore forced to seek justice through other means, Sarah explained. It's one of humanity's oldest and most beloved stories. We've been telling variations of it for as long as we've had language. You're threatening us, Ambassador Zixtar said. We're informing you of the inevitable progression of events, Sarah corrected. You have 48 standard hours to reconsider your position. After that, we will begin implementing our own solution to the problem of galactic injustice. What kind of solution? Conjurador Vecana demanded. Sarah's smile was radiant and terrible. The kind that ensures this conversation never needs to happen again. With anyone. Ever. The 12 human figures began to fade, returning to their vessel through methods that defied all known laws of physics. As they disappeared, Sarah's final words echoed through the diplomatic chamber with a weight of absolute certainty. Remember, representatives, we didn't choose to become what we are. You made us this way, and now you'll live with the consequences of that choice, one way or another. The remembrance folded itself out of normal space-time, leaving the assembled diplomats to contemplate an impossible decision: surrender to demands that would fundamentally alter the balance of galactic power, or face a species that had transcended the normal limitations of reality itself. As emergency communication channels opened and desperate messages flowed between the member worlds, one truth became increasingly clear to all involved. The age of galactic stability was ending, and whatever emerged from the coming crisis would be shaped by humanity's inhuman patience and their very human sense of justice. Humanity stayed quiet for millennia, until the dangerous ship returned. Part 5. The 48-hour deadline passed in a flurry of desperate diplomatic activity. Emergency sessions convened on every member world as governments struggled to comprehend the magnitude of the choice before them. In the end, as Captain Sarah Chun had predicted, fear won out over justice. The Galactic Council's response was delivered by Ambassador Zixtar himself, transmitted to coordinates where the human vessel waited in the space between stars. Captain Chun, Zixtar began, his diplomatic composure barely containing his terror. After extensive deliberation, the Galactic Council must respectfully decline your proposed terms. While we acknowledge historical grievances, the demands you've presented would destabilize the current galactic order and potentially lead to widespread chaos. The current galactic order being one that benefits the 12 ruling species at the expense of everyone else, Sarah replied, her voice carrying across impossible distances with crystalline clarity. We understand your position, Ambassador. Thank you for making our decision simple. Captain, please reconsider, Zixtar pressed. Surely there must be some alternative arrangement that could satisfy both parties. There was, Sarah said. You've just rejected it. The transmission ended, and across the galaxy, every major government began implementing emergency protocols. Defense fleets moved to protect core worlds, military installations went to maximum alert, and civilian populations prepared for a war unlike anything in recorded history. They didn't have to wait long. The first sign that humanity's patience had finally ended came from the hegemony border worlds. 3-star systems simply stopped communicating. No distress calls, no emergency broadcasts, no final transmissions. One moment they were reporting normal operations, and the next silence. When scout ships arrived to investigate, they found the systems unchanged, their planets still inhabited, their populations still alive and apparently healthy. But something fundamental had been altered. The hegemony citizens could no longer leave their worlds. Every attempt to launch spacecraft resulted in the same impossible phenomenon. Vessels would reach the edge of their respective star systems and simply cease to exist, only to reappear moments later back at their point of origin. It was as if an invisible barrier had been erected around each system, one that allowed light and communications to pass through, but prevented any form of physical travel. How is this possible? Demanded Hegemony War Marshal Krotek during an emergency military briefing. Our scientists detect no energy fields, no physical barriers, nothing that could explain this phenomenon. Because they're not using barriers in any conventional sense, Elder Mordun explained wearily. He had been called upon by every major government to provide insight into humanity's capabilities, and each conversation left him feeling older than his already considerable years. They're manipulating the fundamental nature of space-time itself. Those systems haven't been blockaded. They've been edited out of the galactic continuum. Edited out? What does that mean? It means that from the perspective of anyone inside those systems, the rest of the galaxy no longer exists, Mordun replied. And from our perspective, those systems are no longer part of our reality. They exist in parallel dimensions, isolated from everything else. Can this effect be reversed? By us? No, by them. Mordun's ancient shoulders sagged. Presumably, yes, but only if they choose to do so. The second wave of humanity's response targeted the Villani Empire. This time, the effect was different, but no less devastating. Rather than isolating entire star systems, the humans began selectively editing individual planets out of existence. Not destroying them, simply making them cease to be part of normal space-time. Military installations, government centers, and strategic industrial worlds simply faded away, leaving behind empty orbital patterns and confused populations trying to understand how entire worlds could vanish without a trace. They're not attacking us, reported Villani Fleet Commander Isaac Stow during her government's crisis meeting. They're demonstrating that the concept of attack is irrelevant when dealing with their level of technology. How do you defend against an enemy that can simply decide you don't exist? The third demonstration targeted the Crystalline Union's research facilities. In this case, the humans showed a more subtle but equally terrifying capability. Instead of removing the facilities from reality, they began aging them. Research stations that had been built within the last decade suddenly showed centuries of wear and decay. Equipment failed as if it had been operating for millennia, and entire databases corrupted as their storage media experienced accelerated time passage. They're manipulating the temporal flow around our installations, reported Union Science Director Zell Nash with barely controlled panic. Somehow, they're causing localized time distortions that age our equipment into uselessness while leaving personnel unaffected. Why aren't the researchers aging as well? Asked Union Prime Coordinator Veltar. Because the humans don't want to hurt people, Mordun explained when consulted. They're making a point about their capabilities while carefully avoiding unnecessary casualties. This is a demonstration of power, not a massacre. Yet, added Admiral Kexra grimly, the unspoken implication is that they could easily shift from non-lethal demonstrations to something far more permanent. By the end of the first week, the pattern had become clear. The humans were systematically demonstrating their ability to alter fundamental aspects of reality for each of the 12 ruling species. Some governments found their communication networks replaced with systems that only transmitted messages approved by human sensors. Others discovered that their currency had been replaced with economic models that redistributed wealth according to principles of social justice that their populations had never agreed to implement. Most unsettling of all was what happened to the species that had originally enforced humanity's quarantine. The Zephyrians woke up one morning to find that their homeworld's gravity had been reversed, forcing them to live upside down while their infrastructure struggled to adapt. The Corvin mining operations discovered that their equipment could only extract materials that spelled out increasingly complex apologies in various human languages. "They're not trying to conquer us," realized Director Keflon during an emergency council session held in a heavily shielded bunker beneath Nexus Prime. "They're editing us, rewriting our societies according to their preferences. It's social engineering on a scale we've never imagined," agreed Ambassador Zixtar. "They're not destroying our civilizations. They're transforming them into something more aligned with their values." "But why?" asked Counselor Vexena. "What's the point of this elaborate demonstration?" Elder Mordun, who had become an unofficial advisor to the Council during the crisis, smiled sadly. "They're teaching us what they learned during 3 millennia of exile. That technology isn't just about building better weapons or faster ships. True advancement means gaining the power to reshape reality according to your will. And humans, it seems, have achieved that level of advancement. So what do they want from us now?" Director Keflon demanded. "Nothing," Mordun replied. "That's what makes them so dangerous. They no longer need anything from us. They've transcended the limitations that force species to compete for resources or territory. This entire demonstration is them showing us that they could have taken whatever they wanted any time, but chose not to. Then, why are they doing this? Because they want us to understand what we lost when we chose fear over cooperation 3,000 years ago," Mordun explained. "They want us to realize that our ancestors could have learned from humanity instead of imprisoning them. That the galaxy could have become something unimaginably greater if we had embraced diversity instead of enforcing conformity." The final demonstration came without warning and affected every inhabited world simultaneously. For exactly 1 hour, the laws of physics throughout the galaxy changed. Gravity flowed upward, light bent in impossible directions, and time moved in patterns that defied comprehension. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything returned to normal. But the message was unmistakable. Humanity could rewrite the fundamental nature of reality itself, and they had chosen to let everyone experience that power briefly rather than imposing it permanently. In the aftermath, as governments struggled to process what had happened, a final communication arrived from the Remembrance. This time, it was transmitted simultaneously to every inhabited world in the galaxy, appearing on public broadcasts, private communications, and even written in the clouds of gas giant atmospheres. "People of the galaxy," Captain Sarachin's voice announced, reaching every conscious being within the galactic disk, "we hope our demonstrations have been educational. We want you to understand that we could have ended your civilizations at any point during the past 3 millennia. We chose not to because we believe in the potential for growth and change, even among those who have wronged us." However, the message continued, and now other voices joined Sarah's, the entire crew of the Remembrance speaking in harmony. "We will not tolerate another quarantine, another attempt to hide us away because we make you uncomfortable. Humanity is returning to the galactic community, and we will take our place among the stars whether you welcome us or not. We offer you a choice," Sarah concluded. "Accept us as equals, learn from us as we are willing to learn from you, and help us build a galaxy where diversity is celebrated rather than feared. Or continue to cling to your current system, and we will replace it with something better. The decision is yours, but understand, the age of keeping humanity hidden is over." We will be establishing colonies throughout the galaxy over the coming years. We will share our technology with species that embrace cooperation and understanding. We will protect those who cannot protect themselves. And we will ensure that no species ever again faces the isolation that was forced upon us. Welcome to the new galactic age. Try to be worthy of it. The transmission ended, and throughout the galaxy, beings of every species looked up at stars that suddenly seemed different, pregnant with possibilities they had never imagined. The age of small thinking was ending, replaced by something larger, stranger, and infinitely more promising. Captain Sarah Chun stood once more at the observation deck of the Remembrance, watching stars wheel by as her ship prepared to visit worlds that had been denied to her species for 3,000 years. Behind her, her crew worked to prepare for the monumental task of reshaping galactic civilization, not through conquest, but through example. They had become more than human during their long exile, but they had never forgotten the most human of dreams, that tomorrow could be better than today if you were willing to work for it. The galaxy was about to learn whether it shared that dream or whether humanity would need to teach them the hard way. Either outcome was acceptable to beings who had learned patience measured in millennia and whose power was limited only by their imagination. The future would be better, one way or another. They had promised it in the names that still glowed along their ship's hull, the names of everyone who had died to enforce humanity's quarantine. Those dead deserve a universe where such injustice was impossible, and humanity always kept its promises. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 12 different species gathered around the massive circular table. Ambassador Zixtar of the Villani Empire tapped his four-clawed fingers against the polished surface, creating a rhythmic clicking that echoed through the vast space. The emergency session had been called after long-range sensors detected something that should have been impossible. The readings are confirmed, announced Director Keflon, her translucent skin pulsing with anxiety patterns that even other species could recognize. The vessel matches the energy signature from our historical archives. It's the same ship that disappeared 3,000 years ago. A collective shiver ran through the assembled delegates. Every child in the galaxy knew the stories, though most considered them myths designed to frighten younglings into obedience. The tales spoke of a species so violent and unpredictable that they had been quarantined to a single star system on the outer rim of the galaxy. These creatures, called humans, had supposedly built a ship of such devastating power that it could crack planets and turn stars into weapons. "That's impossible," growled Ambassador Thrak, his massive ursine form shifting uncomfortably in his reinforced chair. "The humans have been contained for millennia. Our monitoring stations show they never developed faster-than-light travel. They're still trapped on their little blue world, fighting among themselves like the savages they are." "Yet here we are," Zixtar replied, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of diplomatic experience. "Looking at sensor data that suggests otherwise." He gestured toward the holographic display that dominated the center of the chamber. The image showed a sleek, angular vessel unlike anything in current galactic designs. Its hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and strange energy patterns danced along its surface like captured lightning. The ship had appeared at the edge of the Kepler system without any warning. No hyperspace wake, no dimensional disturbance, no energy buildup that typically preceded faster-than-light travel. One moment the space had been empty, and the next the vessel simply existed there, as if it had always been present. "What do our historical records tell us about this ship?" asked Counselor Vexena, her serpentine neck extending to peer more closely at the hologram. Surely if it posed such a threat, our ancestors would have documented its capabilities. Director Keflon manipulated the display controls, causing ancient text to appear alongside the ship's image. "The records are fragmentary, but what we have is disturbing. The ship was reportedly crewed by only 12 humans, yet it single-handedly destroyed 3 hegemony battle fleets during what our histories call the Silence Wars. Walbelmans, Thraxkufa, against 3 fleets. The stories grow more ridiculous with each telling. The hegemony was no small power," Zixtar reminded him. "They controlled 47 star systems before they encountered humanity. After the wars, they were reduced to 8 systems and sued for peace. Something capable of that level of destruction deserves our attention, regardless of the crew size. Keflon continued reading from the historical archives. According to these records, the humans possessed technology that violated several known laws of physics. Their weapons could apparently manipulate gravity itself, creating localized black holes and spatial distortions. Their shields were reported to be probability barriers that made successful attacks statistically unlikely rather than physically blocked. Probability barriers. They cannot sit softly. That's impossible. You can't manipulate chance itself. Can't you? Asked a new voice from the chamber's entrance. All heads turned to see Elder Mordun of the Ancient Circle shuffling into the room. The old being was one of the few individuals still alive who remembered the time before the human quarantine. His species, the Eternal Archivists, possessed lifespans measured in tens of thousands of years, making him a living repository of galactic history. Elder Mordun, Zixtar said respectfully, rising from his seat. We didn't expect you to attend this emergency session. When a shadow ship returns, Mordun replied, his voice carrying harmonics that spoke of vast age. All who value their existence should pay attention. He moved slowly to an empty chair that materialized from the chamber's smart matter systems. You speak of the humans as if they were merely another species. This is your first mistake. What do you mean? Keflon asked, her anxiety patterns intensifying. Humans are not like us. Mordun explained, his ancient eyes reflecting memories of eons past. Most species develop technology to overcome their limitations. We build ships because we cannot fly. We create weapons because we are not naturally dangerous. We form alliances because we are weak alone. He paused, letting his words sink in. Humans develop technology to enhance what they already possess in abundance. Which is what, exactly? Thrak demanded. Violence, Mordun replied simply. Not the calculated aggression of predators or the defensive reactions of prey. Pure, creative, adaptable violence. They're the only species we have encountered that seems to view conflict not as a necessity, but as an art form. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the life support systems. Finally, Counselor Vexenus spoke. But they've been contained for 3 millennia. Surely they've evolved beyond such primitive instincts. Mordun's laugh was like the sound of ancient stone cracking. You assume they've been contained. What if they simply chose to be quiet? Before anyone could respond to this disturbing suggestion, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. Emergency lights bathed everything in a pulsing red glow as automated systems announced an incoming priority transmission. This is Admiral Kexra of the 5th Defense Fleet, came a strained voice over the communication system. The unknown vessel has begun moving. It's heading directly toward the galactic core at impossible speed. Our sensors indicate it will reach the outer colonies within standard days. Zixtar felt his diplomatic composure beginning to crack. Admiral, what is your fleet's position relative to the vessel? We're maintaining a safe distance of 50,000 kilometers and matching its course. The ship hasn't responded to any communication attempts, and the Admiral's voice faltered. Counselors, you need to see this. The chamber's holographic display shifted to show real-time footage from the Admiral's flagship. The human vessel dominated the view, its dark hull still writhing with those strange energy patterns. But now something else was visible. Along the ship's sides, symbols were appearing, glowing with the same eerie light that danced across its surface. Can your linguistic experts translate those markings? Keflon asked urgently. Already working on it, the Admiral replied. The symbols appear to be ancient Terran script, though the variant is older than anything in our databases. Preliminary translation suggests they're not coordinates or technical specifications. Then what are they? Sixtar Press said. A long pause filled the chamber before the Admiral's voice returned, heavy with implications. They appear to be names, Counselor. Thousands and thousands of names. Elder Mordun nodded slowly, as if confirming something he had long suspected. The names of every being killed by the species that enforced the quarantine, he said quietly. The humans have been keeping count. The massive ship continued its relentless journey toward the heart of the galaxy, carrying with it the accumulated silence of 3,000 years and the weight of unanswered questions. Behind its dark hull, entire civilizations held their breath and wondered what price would be demanded for millennia of enforced solitude. As the emergency session dissolved into chaos, with representatives frantically trying to contact their homeworlds, one fact became crystal clear to all present. Humanity's long silence was ending, and the galaxy was utterly unprepared for what that might mean. The ship pressed onward through the void, its hull now blazing with names like a monument to the dead, while somewhere in its depths, 12 humans prepared to collect a debt that had been growing for 3,000 years.